work? Did it work? Did it work? It worked! Yes! Hello? Wait, can you hear me?
Yes, I think so. Can you hear
Okay.
me?
Yes, I can hear. For a second, I didn't hear anything. I was like, uh-oh. All right. Okay, girl, we're going live. We always start with this. So I have like an affirmation mantra deck, and I would like to do it with you. So I'm going to shuffle. You tell me when to stop. Okay, as easy as that.
Okay, stop.
Okay, stop. And then I'm just going to run my hand through all the cards, and you tell me when to pull.
Okay, pull.
Okay, what's this one? This one says, when I lean on the faith of the universe, peace becomes real. I like the art. Owls! And you have an owl in the background. I like, oh.
Yeah, my partner painted this.
Oh, wow. Super cool. So talented. I tried picking up watercolor painting during COVID, and it was supposed to be a picture of a succulent, and I stopped at like one leaf and it looks like a sliver of cucumber, and I was like, I love watercolor, but I don't have the patience for it. Like
Yeah,
it's a skill.
plants are really hard to paint. I don't do watercolor, but like the acrylic paints I use, I can't do plants. So I get it.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, we have more people. Okay, I'm just going to say hi to everyone. All right, guys. We're just going to jump in. We're going to jump in. And I'm super excited to have you here to I didn't even realize this was the finale of my collective series. I'm just a person who likes even numbers. So I was at like 11. I was like, all right, I need one more. And I was going to go live, but then I was like, you know what? Even better, you. I feel like you are going to be such an inspirational and insight and like a wealth of just perspective for us from SLP lens, not autistic lens, and just like your experience, your lived experience for these questions. So let's jump in and get into burnout.
Yeah.
For those of you who haven't been here, actually, let me back up. Sorry. Actually, I haven't done this in a few weeks, guys. I don't know what I'm doing. Let me back up. Whoa. For those of you who don't know, I created the collective series, and it was really so that I could, I don't like the word interview, but just have conversations with individuals, asking similar questions, but really gaining different voices and perspectives, because the conversation of burnout, boundaries, just wellness and overall well-being is something that I really am passionate about. And I feel like as providers in healthcare space, we need to talk about this more. It's a problem. And the number, like the statistics is 54% of healthcare providers experience burnout. I actually think it's a higher number. I think people may be not aware, or now with COVID, it's exacerbated. So I think the number is like, I don't know, 70, 80%, maybe all. I don't know.
People who don't report it or, leave the job, talk about it or whatever, like I'm sure that number is a lot higher.
Yes. So that is the background on collective, but Allie here, I'm going to let you tell others a little bit about yourself and what they can find on your platform. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm Allie. My Instagram, Allison the Human. It's my personal account, and then in August 2020, I kind of decided to make it public and start using it really just like primarily for advocacy, but also just like talking about my life as an autistic human. So on my page, there's a link tree, and there's a link to my website that has like a few blog entries and some Instagram information as well. And then there's links to some podcast episodes I've done, my YouTube video I did with my partner, and a link for my scheduling as I'm starting experimenting with some private consulting and coaching.
Yes.
An autistic adult, not as a speech path. It's kind of a completely different route as much as the two things kind of overlap in my life. I always like to make it clear now that I'm talking about consulting that I'm not consulting as a speech path, I'm consulting as an autistic person. And so, yeah, it's been really, I've only been doing that for like a couple weeks now.
Yeah, no, I'm so excited. Like getting in touch with you and talking about it, I definitely was like, yes, Allie, you have to do coaching and consultation and speaking. Like you are naturally gifted at speaking, and I'm not just saying that. Like I really feel like your videos that you record, um, the ability you have to take a personal matter, but also really big matter, but consolidate it in like 3 minute clips, 5 minute clips, but you get the point across and the heart of it translated. Like I just really do think you have a natural gift for it. So I'm excited for your journey of coaching and speaking. I honestly feel, honestly, why not throw in honestly? I'm like, I feel like I have to finish that series of three. Um, I feel like every autism center or clinic should be having you come in and other autistic individuals come in to speak about their process and their procedure. And just so you guys know a little background, I don't work in that environment anymore, but I do have a heavy emphasis in working in the autistic community. I worked at an autism center. And that's one of the things that Ali and I spoke off camera about was just how much I have to unlearn. And I know a lot of us, like even you going to grad school, you know the
Yeah.
things we learn.
I
Um,
so much about autism, and like that's the thing that I really have been trying to stress a lot to like my speechy friends and all the educators that I've been talking to and parents too, because people look at like therapists and educators sometimes as like experts, and yes we are, but like there that's not always the case about everything. And like you know I was taught a lot of things that I would never teach someone again about autism, and like I felt very much prepared in both my undergrad and graduate degrees to be a speech path. But I would say the area lacking was autism. And I think that I wouldn't necessarily say programs didn't cover autism to the degree they needed to. I would say their content wasn't accurately. So, and that's like across the board. So there's nothing to feel like bad or guilty about. Like we're all being taught things and we can't like, we just have to unlearn and do better.
yeah. Okay, so now that I actually did a proper introduction, all of that, let's jump into the question that we all talk about, which is burnout. I really want to ask about your experience, and you've had like kind of like an escalation, like a buildup, right? Until it got to a really bad position where you're like, oh shoot, I'm really hitting a wall. Um, Talk to us a little bit about that, what it looked like. Yeah.
Yeah. So burnout for me came as it was very much like a building thing, like you said. And the more I look back, the more I realize this burnout has been building probably since middle school, since,
Mhm.
high school, definitely, because um, I, even in high school, I was working like 20 to 30 hours a week at pizza places, and I was playing soccer, I was playing lacrosse, like I was, doing schoolwork, and it was a lot. I was very busy. I very much thrive when I have too much to do, and so that kind of colored a lot of like adolescence. And then in undergrad, same thing. I had two majors. I had part-time jobs. I taught workout classes at the gym. Like
Wow.
graduated in 3 years instead of four. I did all of that with like summer classes. I took extra classes every semester. And then I went straight to grad school. I ended up having to take extra classes, at least one every semester of grad school as well, because of prereqs I was missing because I did undergrad in 3 years. So then I went right into my CF. And then after my CF ended, it was a school CF. Was working in post-acute rehabs, and I was floating to 2 to 3 buildings a day all over Portland. It was,
Oh my goodness.
and then I got a hospital job, and then shortly into that hospital job, all of that had been building, and like at that point, I had never received professional mental health care at all. And so I at this point too, I still had no idea I was autistic. So I am just like going and basically running on E, and I'm like, well, for years it was okay, get this degree, then you can chill. Get this, then you can chill. And then I was like, okay, well, I don't have a benchmark anymore. And it all really came crumbling down the more I realized I'm autistic. Pretty sure I'm autistic. This is what I'm seeing. Okay. And it was like these physical, I had a very full blown severe autistic burnout. Like my body felt like it was disintegrating. All of my chronic health conditions really just kind of flared up. Some of them I had no idea about until then, like my fibromyalgia. And I was so sick, and all of this exploded. I went to the ER on March 12th for a lot of things, and on March 13th was like the initial COVID shutdown here.
The
So,
world shut down.
and I couldn't access medical care because I didn't have a staff care anywhere because I was newish in Oregon. So I couldn't access care. I couldn't get back to work. I ended up that was a whole thing. Within the sickness and my illness and my burnout, I was pushed out of that hospital job. And so then I spent a really long time just trying to be healthy. Like my partner was at times doing like everything for me. Like I was in physically so much pain. I couldn't move. I could barely eat. Like there was just so much. For a minute, I had cyclic vomiting syndrome. There was a day I was vomiting for 6 hours straight. Like,
Oh my gosh.
hours. Like it was just one thing after another. And I was just having a really, really hard time accessing care for a lot of reasons. And yeah, it was just like a lifetime of not knowing I was autistic and of untreated mental health and physical health issues that finally blew up in my face. And honestly, I'm really, really lucky and grateful that it happened post grad school and post CF when I like had a minute to breathe in terms of not missing deadlines and, just like, yeah. So burnout I'm very familiar.
Like, first off, how, like, I'm just in awe. I don't know if I really have words of just like the amount of things you did. Like, I mean, to say overachieving, I feel like is like the least because you pushed yourself, like not just in one area of your life, but like multiple areas. I feel like it would be even fair to say in all areas of your life, you were constantly pushing yourself to that next level.
Any of my high school friends, any of my college friends, like I was go, go, go. I was in such good shape. I went into college soccer running like 2 miles in less than 12 minutes or less than 13 minutes. Like I was crazy fast, like literally and figuratively in everything. And I just like, this is normal.
Oh my goodness. And so, yeah, I think that what I would like to walk through now, like that, I mean, clearly burnout in so many ways, but also, I just want to say as a side note of just the trauma that probably stored up of the stressors, the experiences you've had, things that you've probably internalized that we'll probably get into in a little bit. I have yet to read the book called The Body Keeps Score, but that has to be somewhere in your body as you did this, like go, 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 go for so many years. And not just with little things, like huge things and moving and like like we all know CF, grad school, all of those things are already really hard. So like, but then like to move and add like personal factors to a lot.
My undergrad was in New York, but then I left New York and went to Salt Lake City, Utah for like I had never really been to the East Coast or the West Coast very much. And so like moving out to Salt Lake City was such a shock. And then, all my friends had their senior year of college together and like that was really hard. And then grad school was super fun, like meeting my cohort, meeting like my speech people and all of that. And then when I ended grad school, I had a lot of stuff going on in my personal life right at the time of graduation. So I was like, I got to get out of here. moved to Portland, and I had, I'd never been here. I didn't know anyone here. I'd been here, like, I went to the coast once to go camping, and I went to Salt and Straw on the way to the airport, of course. But it was like 2 years before I moved here, and I had no idea I was gonna move here. But it's, yeah, like I just like didn't have the time to slow down, and I was like, I looked at it like this isn't an option, and for me to do what I want to do in life, I just have to like suck it up and blindly like go for it, which I don't super recommend.
I mean, but it sounds like you did it for the salt and straw, so maybe we recommend that part. Just kidding. Okay. So there's two things I'm thinking about right now, which is one, the contribution of what masking looked like throughout this time, because like we all know the iceberg, right? We've seen the iceberg, like tip of iceberg, and underneath, like the under the water so much. I feel like everything you said, wow, that's a lot. That's all kind of still at the tip, maybe at the line of the water, but underneath that masking and what that looked like. I would love to talk about that. And the other thing that I'm thinking about is just what does autistic burnout look like in contrast to burnout? Because I know for me, I've been learning a lot from the autistic community and individuals. And one of the things that I have come in contact like with several individuals, and they have said to me, and I've been like researching more, and I'm like, oh, that I would love to talk about it, which is I have several individuals who told me they lose their verbal capabilities. Like they say they get to a point where they don't even, like don't know why, but they just can't even speak. And I was thinking that's a really different, characteristic. Like they are like, that's a big characteristic of autistic burnout versus just burnout. So I know I threw out a lot, but let's go with the masking, like getting into it. Like what were the ways that you've masked throughout this journey?
Yeah, I mean, with masking, I think that I can't really talk about my masking in terms of just like being autistic masking. I
Yeah.
think a lot of masking earlier on, especially in my life, that came from being queer and
Mm-hmm.
knowing it, not knowing it, not wanting to deal with it. I mean, I was in a hetero relationship through all of undergrad. Like I was in a relationship for almost 10 years, from junior high up through grad school. And like in a way, looking back, I think that like I don't know, that totally like impacted me trying to figure out, like I think it kind of gave me the freedom to not worry about like dating during college, of like going here and going to this bar and that stuff, because I was like, oh well, I've got my relationship, that's fine. I can focus on the school and all of the obnoxious other things I have on my schedule. So it like the way I think of masking, and I like I'm trying to think back and think like, when did I start to feel the need to do this? Because I didn't have the conscious awareness of masking, but like when did this first start? And I feel like, similar to what I've heard other autistic people say, I've always had this sense of things have to be right, things have to be safe, things have to be like rule following, and like I need to be a rule follower. I need to be like in good with like universal rules of things. And that totally influenced me in school, wanting to be a good student, wanting to do all of those things. But it kind of like in the last few years, I'm trying to kind of like tear that apart and separate from that masking tendency. And it's like when I let myself like unmask, and especially like when I came out as queer and when I came out of with my autism diagnosis, it's kind of like there's this film that I no longer have to like do everything through. Like there's this level of like restriction that is non-existent, like it's like not spoken, but it just exists in my brain, and like I don't even really think about it, but it's like, okay, these are my rules and this is what I do. And so unmasking for me has really been like separating those beliefs and being like, why do I think this? What is heteronormative about these views? What is able? What is like just growing up and not knowing like what is what? So yeah, I'm still trying to figure out all the masking.
Well, the way you're describing it, because it's almost like without realizing that you are autistic, you were just walking through life, just kind of experiencing it as is. And it almost makes me feel like intuitively, you always had a feeling of like, all right, there's something, but it is such a subconscious as opposed to a conscious awareness. And it almost feels like there is a veil. Like it's not like a big blocker where you're like, here's this big block or barricade that was me masking, but it was like a veil. And it's like, it wasn't that you weren't present and it wasn't you, but there is a little bit of like a distortion of like, okay, how am I interacting with these experiences? So it seems so like it's such a like fine line of that. And that's got to be hard to unpack, kind of like, yeah, where was I, like where did it come from, which parts are actually masking, and like for which reason, like, yeah.
Yeah. There's also with masking, there's like that big overarching, like how I function, how I relate to everything feel of like that veil of masking and things. But there's also like kind of like macro and micro. Like there's like the little instances where I know that something that I want to do or something that's going on I probably shouldn't be doing. So it's like I've developed a lot of kind of coping mechanisms to mask that are like very socially appropriate, right? Like socially appropriate for girls. But things like twirling my hair, fidgeting with my hair, playing with my rings, pens, tapping my nails, like there's a lot in individual situations and like certain contexts where masking sometimes is just like hiding my needs and like pretending like the lights aren't bugging me or the sound's not bugging me or like pretending whatever. And it's like you said, it's not like I'm being fake. It's not like I'm not being me. It's I'm reading the situation and I very well know how people are going to react to things, and I'm watching that at every second, and it's a self-preservation mechanism is really what it is.
Oh man. And do you find that now that you've stepped into this identity of being autistic, do you find that it's easier to not mask, or do you feel like that's still something you're like, I'm still playing around, figuring out what that looks like?
Yes and no. I would say that before I discovered I was autistic, my default was always masking, right? And now I think that I've kind of fine tuned my default or my baseline to be mostly more authentic and like whatever autistic characteristics like come up. And like I find it easier to mask with things, but it's also like uh, it's more of like when I mask now, it's very intentional and of like there's a good reason, or sometimes if I'm just really tired. I mean, it's hard to tell, but
Yeah.
I I've been really trying to not mask, which can be weird when I'm hanging out with people who are used to what I used to be. So it's I don't know. It's a give and a take. Like a lot of my friends, like everyone's so supportive. Everyone's like watching what I'm doing and like, reading the things that I share, but I think in the moment I feel weird of like, oh, I'm gonna like openly stim right now, or like I'm gonna be really dramatic and I'm really mad and I'm just gonna let it go because I need to, and then I'll like so it I don't know. It's weird. It's also weird in COVID, like but
I mean, agreed. COVID times, like, it's just weird, period. Um, all right. So I kind of want to jump into then some of the things that I know are specific, like when I was saying the burnout component of losing verbal capabilities. Like, did you, when you said you went to ER and that was like the epitome, did you feel like there were days where, because you said physically you were hurting so much, did you feel days where you're just like, I can't even talk?
um I mean, I think for me most of that those days when I wasn't wanting to talk or be social or like things like that were more like emotional things. I think where I experience periods of being less verbal and not wanting to speak, for me mostly comes around like having a meltdown or a shutdown or like for example, before I knew I was autistic, I would occasionally have these like big blowout days where I'd have a great day and I'd come home and I'd shut the door and I would just like immediately start bawling and having this full body reaction and basically be like catatonic for like 10, 12 hours in bed, just like stuck in that. And I think a lot of that was from delaying things and pushing things off and masking. Um, but I still, to a much lesser degree, can experience those things like when I'm really, really tired, really not feeling well, really overworked for, a week or so. And then I I can be less talkative. Um, Occasionally, if I like immediately get like really bad news and I'm trying to figure out how I feel about it, or feeling really sad about something I just heard, but I don't want everyone around me to like see that and I don't want to like share that, I'll just kind of go to a point of it does feel like I can't access my words. It's not like an intentional thing. It feels like I know exactly what I want to say. I know exactly why I want to say it. I'm like the me in my head is like screaming it, but I like can't initiate it. It's just not I just I know if I try to initiate it, like my everything will just like crumble kind of, and I won't even be able to get it out. So it's again it can be like a protective mechanism of like, okay, I'm not ready to engage with you. I'm not ready to say this. I'm not ready to share this. Like I need a second. So
Yeah. No, that's a really good insight and a great way to explain that experience for you or share that experience. It also makes me think of the few other individuals I spoke to talked about a memory fog too in general. And you kind of talk about that a little bit. It's just like there's just a lot going on and it could just feel like sensory wise, physically, there's just so much coming in that you almost start to have a fog and you're like, I think I know what I want to say, but I don't like it just feels like there's a disconnect. And I think it was like dissociation where just like they were saying like I just don't feel connected in my body and my thought like things are just very confusing and overwhelming. Um, someone asked, does that ever happen at work as an SLP, or are you able to wait until you are home?
um well, thinking back to grad school, I had a handful of mental breakdowns, panic attacks in the clinic room, like we all do. Um
Yeah.
Thinking about work, I don't think that no, nothing like that's ever happened like during a session or a meeting. Like it's very things like that have happened around work have happened like talking to a supervisor after a session during grad school where I like messed up and then I like held it together the whole session and I like walked out and she like of course was observing the whole time and I don't even think she said a word and I just started bawling. Like I lost it because I remember that specific client was like my first adult client in grad clinic and I was like so pumped and then I just like something very like simple like slipped through my radar and I just lost it. And so I guess like things like that don't really happen at work anymore. Things like that now, if I'm having a bad day or like something comes up, or it might not even be work related, like I have very much had to train my brain just like you have to get through this, you have no other option, so this is what we're doing. And then as soon as I'm out of that necessity mode, things like explode and it feels a lot more like I don't have control in those moments because everything's been suppressed for so long that it's just like we're coming, that's it.
So would you say now you've definitely learned how to kind of almost like set yourself up with like the strategies that work? Like what have you found that helps in those moments? Like do you just kind of have like a mantra that you say, or you do just pep talk and then you're like, all right, after this I know not I'm going to go shut off from other people, I need to decompress, gain my energy back before I go out?
It's very situational for me. Like, it really depends on the day and the instance of like what's going to make me feel more recharged and feel more regulated. So it depends. I mean, right now, I think that I don't have that many like set coping mechanisms that I like and that I go to, because right now I'm still really trying to figure out what's my baseline, like what's going on, and like what is happening. So like I have been a lot more focused on my awareness and learning like the